Good morning, Dr. Neeta Mathur from Shri Govind Singh Gurjar Government College, Nasirabad. Yesterday we looked at, for the last 2 days actually, we looked at the biography of William Shakespeare. Today we will take a look at one of the sonnets prescribed for the BA Part 1 English Literature students. In paper 1, they have the sonnet, "Let me not to the marriage of true minds," and "When to the sessions." First, a look at what exactly is a sonnet. The definition of a sonnet. A sonnet is a type of 14-line poem. Traditionally, the 14 lines of a sonnet consist of an octave or 2 quatrains. A quatrain is a stanza of 4 lines each, making up a stanza of 8 lines. That is, 2 quatrains means 8 lines. And a sestet, which is the second part of the sonnet, a stanza of 6 lines. This is the general pattern of a sonnet. Sonnets generally use a meter of iambic pentameter and follow a set of rhyme scheme. Within these general guidelines for what makes a sonnet, there are a wide variety of variations. For example, we have the Miltonic sonnet, we have the Shakespearean sonnet, we have the Spenserian sonnet, all of which are prescribed for BA Part 1. The 2 most common sonnet variations are the Italian sonnet, also called a Petrarchan sonnet, and the English sonnet, also called a Shakespearean sonnet. The main difference between the Italian and English sonnet is in the rhyme schemes they use. So here is a look at the summary of the sonnet, "Let me not to the marriage of true minds." Of the 154 sonnets composed by Shakespeare, this is sonnet number 116. First, the summary. Despite the confessional tone in the sonnet, there is no direct reference to the youth. The general context, however, makes it clear that the poet's temporary alienation refers to the youth's inconstancy and betrayal, not that of the poet. Although coming as it does on the heels of the previous sonnet, the poet may be trying to convince himself again that now he loves the youth best. Sonnet 116 then seems a meditative attempt to define love independent of reciprocity. Reciprocity means returning something in equal measure. Fidelity means faithfulness, and eternal beauty. The poet says, "Love is not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come." After all his uncertainties and apologies, Sonnet 116 leaves little doubt that the poet is in love with love. This is interesting. The essence of love and friendship for the poet, apparently, is reciprocity or mutuality. That is when something is shared in equal measure between 2 people or by 2 people for one another. In Sonnet 116, for example, the ideal relationship is referred to as the marriage of true minds. And the word marriage basically means union. A union that can be realized by the dedicated and faithful. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. The marriage service in the Episcopal Book of Common Prayer says, "If any of you know cause or just impediment," impediment means any obstruction. That is, if any of you have a reason to stop this marriage, in other words. It provides the model of the sonnet's opening lines. In them, we see the poet's attitude towards love, which he proceeds to define first negatively. He explained what love is not, and then he positively defines what love is. The ever-fixed mark is the traditional sea mark and guide for mariners, that is the North Star, whose value is inestimable, although its altitude, meaning its height, has been determined. Unlike physical beauty, the star is not subject to the ravages of time. In other words, time cannot destroy it. Nor is true love, which is not time's fool. The poet then introduces the concepts of space and time, applying them to his ideal of true love. He says, love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. Edge of doom can be understood as the end of the world. In other words, love lives on forever. Note that the verb alters is lifted directly from line 3, in which the poet describes what love is not. Bears it out means survive. Edge of doom refers to the judgment day. Finally, with absolute conviction means surety, the poet challenges others to find him wrong in his definition. As he says, if this be error and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved. This is the last couplet of the sonnet. Just how secure the poet is in his standards of friendship and love, which he hopes that he and the youth can achieve, is evident in this concluding couplet. He stakes his own poetry on his wager that love is all he has described it to be. Sonnet 116 is one of William Shakespeare's most well-known and features the opening line that is all too quotable. And I read, "Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments." It goes on to declare that true love is no fool of time, it never alters. It has the traditional 14 lines, mostly full of rhyme and iambic pentameter as a basic meter. There are some lines that do not follow the strict iambic pentameter beat. You can read about them later. Note the turn in the final couplet, that is the last 2 lines, where the poet sums up the previous 12 lines. Shakespeare's 154 sonnets were first published as an entity in 1609 and focus on the nature of love in relationships and in relation to time. The first 17 are addressed to a young man, the rest to a woman known as the Dark Lady. But there is no historical evidence to suggest that such people ever existed in Shakespeare's life. The sonnets form a unique outpouring of poetic expression devoted to the machinations of mind and heart. They encompass a vast range of emotion and use all manner of device to explore what it means to love and be loved. Sonnet 116 sets out to define true love by firstly telling the reader what love is not. It then continues on to the end couplet The speaker, that is the poet, declaring that if what he has proposed is false, his writing is futile, means it is useless, it's a waste of time, and no man has ever experienced love. As he says, love is not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his compass, bending sickles compass come. Love is not harvested by time's sharp edge. It endures love. Love conquers all, as Virgil said in his Eclogue. And if the reader has no faith in the writer's argument, then what use are the words, and what good is the human experience of being in love? Now, an introduction to the poem in a nutshell. Sonnet 116 is one of the best known and most beloved poems in William Shakespeare's sonnet sequence. This says a lot, since this group of 154 poems, on the whole, is probably the world's most famous collection of love poetry. This particular sonnet, along with the oft-repeated Sonnet 18, title of which is Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day, has been quoted and referenced time after time, and to this day remains one of Shakespeare's greatest hits. Fans of period drama may recognize it from the 1995 film version of Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility, while others among us might have experienced it as part of a wedding service or 2 or 10. For obvious reasons, it's a big hit with the bridal crowd. And why should I care? What is love? No, we are not just quoting the lyrics to a hauntingly annoying German techno song, the one from SNL's Night of the Roxbury skits. In fact, this is one of the questions that has plagued humanity ever since our earliest ancestors started flirting across the primordial bog. It is one of the all-time great mysteries of the world as we know it, and perhaps second only to the question, what is the meaning of life? No matter however much we may care or don't think we care, the nagging question of love is always loitering somewhere in the backs of our minds. This sonnet attempts to put a stop to this constant questioning and to provide an answer. Love, like diamonds, is forever, and we all know that diamonds are a woman's best friend. Jokes apart, we don't get a concrete definition of how love feels or what it entails. In other words, what is involved in love. Instead, we are told that the only thing that really matters is in true love is its immortal quality. In other words, love lives on forever, and we have countless examples of them. The stories of Romeo and Juliet, the story of Indian folklore, the story of Heer Ranja, to mention a few. If you think about it, this is quite a clever way to answer the big question. Basically, it says that you can keep your personal definitions of love, romantic or platonic, sexual or intellectual, what have you. But to really earn the sought after title of true love, all relationships have to pass the big test, and that is the test of time. The poet is not concerned with the individual details of our relationships. And it's a good thing he is not, because we could go on for hours. Rather, he just wants us to think of love in the long term, rather than getting swept away in the melodrama of short lived passion. Once again, a look at the summary of Sonnet 116. This sonnet attempts to define love by telling both what it is and what it is not. In the first quatrain, the speaker says that love, the marriage of true mind, is perfect and unchanging. It does not admit impediments, and it does not change when it finds changes in the loved one. In other words, even if the loved one has changed, true love will remain constant. In the second quatrain, the speaker tells what love is through a metaphor. It is a guiding star to lost ships, wandering barks, that is not susceptible to storms. In other words, storms cannot destroy it. As he says, it looks on tempests, and is never shaken. In the third quatrain, the speaker again describes what love is not. It is not susceptible to time. Though beauty fades in time as rosy lips and cheeks come within his benden sickle's compass. A sickle is that appliance that is used to cut the crop on the fields. Love does not change with hours and weeks. Instead, it bears it out even to the end of doom. In the couplet, the speaker attests to his certainty that love is as he says. In his statements, if his statements can be proved to be error, he declares he must never have written a word, and no man can ever have been in love. The commentary. Along with Sonnets 18, Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day, and 130, My Mistress's Eyes Are Nothing Like the Sun, Sonnet 116 is one of the most famous poems in the entire sequence. The definition of love that it provides is among the most often quoted and anthologized in the poetic canon. Essentially, this sonnet presents the extreme ideal of romantic love. It never changes, it never fades, it outlasts death and admits no flaw. What is more, it insists that this ideal is the only love that can be called true. If love is mortal, changing, or impermanent, the speaker writes that no man ever loved. The basic division of this poem's argument into the various parts of the sonnet form is extremely simple. The first quatrain says what love is not, in other words, changeable. The second quatrain says what it is, in other words, a fixed guiding star, unshaken by tempests. The third quatrain says more specifically what love is not, time's fool, that is subject to change in the passage of time. And the couplet announces the speaker's certainty. What gives this poem its rhetorical and emotional power is not its complexity. Rather, it is the force of its linguistic and emotional conviction. The language of Sonnet 116 is not remarkable for its imagery or metaphoric range. In fact, its imagery, particularly in the third quatrain, the image of time wielding a sickle that ravages beauty's rosy lips and cheeks, is rather standard within the sonnets. And its major metaphor, that is love as a guiding star, when he's comparing love to a guiding star, is hardly startling in its originality. But the language is extraordinary in that it frames its discussion of the passion of love within a very restrained, very intensely disciplined rhetorical structure. with a masterful control of rhythm and variation of tone. The heavy balance of love is not time's fool to open the third quatrain, the declamatory oh no to begin the second. The speaker makes an almost legalistic argument for the eternal passion of love. And the result is that the passion seems stronger and more urgent for the restraint in the speaker's tone. That's all for today. Goodbye.